to see you. I'm very excited for edition number 4 of the Science Art Summit. And this turned into one of my favorite activities because I can always think about the people whose work I admire and invite them. And almost every speaker I requested also was happy to join. So I think it's a cool sign that people are actually willing to put some effort into contributing to this community. And yeah, I look very much forward today to hear 5 nice talks and what people have to say about their work, their career path, and their creative process. I'm gonna kick it off with yeah, short welcome note and sharing a couple of thoughts about freelancing as an academic, which might be of interest to some of you. But first, let's have a look at the menu. And so the plan is that we're gonna have 1.5 hours of talks, 15 minutes per speaker. And at the end, we will close, like always, with a panel discussion, with an open Q&A session where you can ask all the questions that you have on your mind directly to the speakers of today's session. And then at the end, we will have private hangout rooms with some speakers. So you can directly go there and talk to the speakers one by one. And in the past, that has proven to be a nice format that people appreciated. And yeah, I'm going to drop by in some of the rooms, but I'm not going to have my own one. And yeah, I'm very excited. So let's kick it off. We have 6 or 5 speakers and me, and it's a really diverse lineup. So we have an oil painter, we have a neuropsychologist who's also doing art, we have Kelly Krause, the creative director at Nature, we have Peter Mindek, who runs a scientific animation studio, or who co-founded Nanographics, a scientific animation studio in Vienna, and we have Mary O'Reilly, who's an avid science communicator that writes a great newsletter and does very cool illustrations and arts. And yeah, I'm very excited about every one of them. So let's kick it off. And I was wondering what to talk about myself. And every week I get a couple of emails asking from people asking, hey, how did you get into the whole science art, science illustration thing? And what were your challenges in the beginning? So I figured that this might be of interest to some of you. And here I would like to share my own story and a little bit of hard data, what it's actually like if you're a full-time freelancer who left the lab. And this might give you a more concrete impression of, yeah, whether that's interesting for you and the ups and downs associated with the job. So basically, my own story is really the story of a geneticist's evolution into an artist. And back in 2017, almost 10 years ago, I was a young aspirational PhD student. I was very excited about science. I moved to Vienna for my PhD, joined the elegans genetics lab, and I was full of dreams and hopes and loved what I was doing. I loved science. I loved the lab. And back then I was already painting. I come from street art originally, but 2017 I did fun jobs. For example, this was one of the first science things I did. Being a nematode enthusiast, I painted this comic about the incredible Captain Elegans and the xenobiotic sister species of Doom. It's a little bit inspired by Dune, if you know the movie. And this was stuff I did for fun at the institute. And then I got actually into the local theater club. And this is how I learned Photoshop. So I designed posters for the local Vienna Biocenter Drama Club. These were my first jobs, but jobs in the sense of a project somebody asked me for. It didn't occur at all to me back then that one could charge money for this, theoretically. And then I was doing my PhD, and I was happy. I liked my PhD. But it came with its own challenges, so I think many of you can relate that some say if the PhD doesn't drive you crazy, then you're probably not doing it right. I'm not sure if this is the framing one needs to go, but for me, it came with some challenges at the end. And when thinking about what to do in the future, when I was graduating end of 2020, I really didn't know. I loved science, I loved the lab, but the classic academic career pathway wasn't a great fit for me for personal reasons. So I did what most people do in this situation, which is, I forgot one. This was 2019, a graffiti of the elegans I painted, and this was my personal start for science art. I sent it to a conference of the International the Elegance Conference, and people really liked it, and that was a very beautiful experience because I could feel that people actually liked this stuff, which I had been doing for myself up to that time point. But yeah, then the end of my PhD was near, and I did what every lost PhD student that doesn't know what to do with their life does. I started a bridge postdoc. And what a bridge postdoc is, it's basically you have a postdoc contract for 1 year or so because you don't really know what to do. And my 1 year bridge postdoc ended up taking 2.5 years. And while doing this, I kept painting worms because that's what a nematode enthusiast loves to do. And I did not know what to do. So in 2020, I had on the one side not completely given up on the academia plan. So I was scouting some labs for an ambitious postdoc, but I didn't actually send any applications. And I kept painting on the side. And 2022, I got my first journal cover of the EMBO journal. That was also one of my highlights when you actually see your stuff published. It's different because it's a little bit of external validation that what you're doing there is not completely unreasonable. But yeah, so I went on without a good plan. And then in 2023, it wasn't a great year because I was still in the postdoc lab. I was suffering from the curse that the project I did was actually going somewhere. So I had a good reason to stay in the lab, but simultaneously I knew that what I was doing there didn't get me where I wanted to be. And that started to mess me up more and more. And then in 2023, I was not in a good place. I kind of had this vague idea of doing biotech science, but I didn't send a single application because I didn't fully feel it. And this was the first time I had this idea, hey, maybe give this freelancing thing a chance. But back then I was talking to people, and for example, my PhD supervisor, with whom I have a very good relationship, she told me, hey, you're a smart guy. You want to throw that away by leaving the lab, and artists are struggling. And she meant well with me. So there were a lot of doubts, but for the lack of a better alternative, I figured, hey, why not give this a shot? But I was very unsure about it. There was a lot of, I was scared that it would go wrong, and what do you do then? And then there was this one moment. I did a cover design, and when you send a cover to a journal, then there's a low chance that it gets accepted. It's with papers, like with papers, really. And then I was in August 2023, I was on this techno festival and I got an email that my Mall Cell cover was accepted. And I was very happy about it. And this was in the middle of the period where I wasn't sure what to do. And then I had this epiphany while it was 4 a.m. on a rave. And I figured, hey, fuck it, let's do this. And if it goes wrong, nothing is lost and you can still go back, right? And then shortly after, I had another cover accepted, which was encouraging that I was onto something. So then, since 2024, I'm a full-time freelancer and I love it. There are ups and downs. There are times where I suffer. There are times which are great. But over the years, I had the pleasure to work with a lot of amazing scientists, doing a lot of projects I love. Overall, I'm happy. There are weeks where I'm not happy, but I think that's the case with every job. Yeah. And now to the hard data part I promised, because I actually meticulously tracked what was going on the last 2 years. So here are some numbers that you might find interesting. The biggest one, another day, another dollar. Can you actually make a living out of this? So if you look at my income, and that's net profit or net salary, since 2020 until 2025. Basically, 2020, I still had a PhD salary, and then I had a part-time postdoc contract, 30 hours per week. So my employee salary increased a little bit. And in these years, I made a little, very little money on the side freelancing. I charged like 300 per project, way too little, but it was a little extra income. And then 2024 was the first time full-time freelance, and there I made roughly as much as a PhD student net. And then 2025, I matched my part-time postdoc salary, which is enough to comfortably live of it in Vienna. And the goal for this year is to get to the full-time postdoc salary. I'm quietly optimistic that this is going to happen. And what one thing is that people often underestimate, because here I listed net profit, right? But the revenue you have is much more. So here's a breakdown of the expenses you actually have. And that's for me 26K on average per year. And half of this goes to social insurance and taxes. So 50% of these 26,000 is just stuff I pay fixed. And the other part goes to materials and equipment. I have to admit or confess, a lot of the stuff is also things I privately enjoy buying as an artist, but it's all a business expense. So in good consciousness, I can write that off. I pay around 2,500 per year for subscriptions, Adobe, ChatGPT, whatever. Outsourcing and professional services are together around 16%. And then you have a little bit of home office and travel expenses. But so that's the expenses you have. So actually, gross, I earned around 60K, but what's left is around 33K last year. And then this one was interesting to see where the money is actually coming from. So here I break down the project types I have. And one quarter around is artwork, where people really just want art to exhibit in their institute. So without this going onto a journal cover or so. These are cool projects because you're fairly free. Then around another quarter is workshops, so teaching. I didn't expect it in the beginning, but teaching is a very nice and rewarding activity, and it's actually a solid plannable stream of income because you book these workshops half a year in advance. So the big advantage is that you know you're going to earn some money that month. Cover artwork, it's around 12%. Videos and animations, it's around 17%. Figures and graphical abstracts, that's 11%. And then presentations, that's coaching people on presentations and designing nice presentations for them. It's always grant applications where it's about a lot of money, so people actually look for an external to do a good job. And these are also jobs I enjoy. So that's the project distribution. And now let's have another look at some interesting figures, which is where the time goes that you spend and other interesting numbers. And when I did this analysis, I was actually surprised. So from all the time I spent working, only 40% is billable work. Only 40% of the time I spent working ends up being on an invoice. So if you earn 100 euros or 120 euros per hour, that sounds great. But you have to take into account that actually the minority of your time is time you actually charge for, in my case. 20% is lost time, and by lost time I mean stuff I do which is not irrelevant, but which ends up going nowhere. So you write a grant application, which doesn't get funded. Or you plan a project, you prepare drafts, you send them to a client, but they end up not committing. Or you try a new style or something like this. That's also a fair chunk. Then around 13% is content creation, so just writing LinkedIn posts and so on. Client communication, 10%, another 10% roughly admin, so doing your taxes. And course development, and finally we have 4% networking and community, so doing stuff like the Science Art Summit here. And it was interesting for me to see this breakdown of where my time actually goes. And then some other numbers I picked, which I found curious. I love to travel, and I actually get to travel a lot. So on average, in 2024 and 2025, per year, I spent 109 days, not in Vienna, but traveling. Those were not holiday days. So when I travel, I spend 2 to 4 hours a day working. So I try to get up early and then get in a couple of hours and finish at noon. And that's probably the one thing I love most about my job, that I'm able to do this. And in winter, when it gets shitty in Vienna, you can just head off to Asia and have a good time and earn some money on the side. My weekly workload differs between 15 and 80 hours, very chill weeks and intense weeks. On average, it's roughly 40. I do 35 projects per year, and the average income per invoice is around 1,800. I send around 12 emails per workday, and I sit in 143 video calls a year. So you spend a lot of time in video calls, and you spend a lot of time writing emails. I have this Aura ring which tracks my stress level, so I could quantify that Monday is the most stressful day I have because you got off on the weekend and then you start on Monday morning at 8 and you're like, whoa, fuck, there's all this stuff I have to do. While Wednesday is the most relaxed day. So after I eat all the accumulated work debt on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, I finally get to chill a little bit. And yeah, that's freelancing life in numbers. It may be different for everyone, but I thought it would be interesting to give you an insight. Let me check the time. Okay, I'm roughly on time. So then one thought to leave you with, if that's interesting to you, if you consider being a freelancer, either part-time or full-time, then I think the most important thing to know is that you don't need to reinvent yourself. Because here's one of my favorite graphics. I stole it from someone on LinkedIn, Eleanor Hoffer. When you're a PhD student, then what the world thinks you are is they think you're a PhD student. But what you actually are, you're all these different things. You do graphic design when you do figures, you do admin, you review, you teach, you write, and so on. So you have all these skills that you develop in your time in the lab. And these skills are actually worth a lot and can be turned into real services. So if you consider freelancing, chances are you have a couple of things you like doing, presentations or figures or writing, and the combination of the skills you already have, this is your freelance niche. And this can go from, for example, if you have an eye for visuals or storytelling, you can do figure design, presentation design, cover artwork. If you like writing, then you can become a manuscript editor or consult people on grants or write content for biotech companies. If you like teaching, then workshops are a great opportunity. Institutes and universities almost always look for people who give workshops or one-on-one coaching on presentations, which I would also call consulting. So the message being that your existing core skills are worth a lot, and actually you can readily turn them into services that people need because it solves important problems for them. And for this, you don't need to go to school or you don't need to take a year off to own your skills. You have already what it takes. You just need to learn how to package it. And with that, I'm done. I'm starting a freelance art newsletter or science art newsletter. If you want to hear more of this stuff, drop me a line at philip@dexheimerlab.com and I'll sign you up. And with this, thank you very much for your attention. And it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is Friedrich Bliem, who is a good friend of mine.